The arrival. The sky over New York was unlike anything Tony Stark had ever seen. A deep violet haze spread across the horizon, casting the skyscrapers in an eerie, unnatural glow. The city buzzed with normal afternoon energy, unaware of the approaching threat, until a sharp crack echoed across the skyline, and the air seemed to tear itself apart. Hovering in his Iron Man suit above Times Square, Tony scanned the anomaly. His HUD flickered as readings spiked. "Well, that's new," he muttered. "Never thought I'd see Manhattan get a front-row ticket to a cosmic light show." Then, without warning, a massive portal tore open mid-air. Its edges were jagged, like reality itself had been shredded, and through it poured a force unlike anything Tony had encountered. The aliens were extraordinary. Towering figures, exoskeletons pulsating with violet energy, moved with unnerving precision. Their eyes glowed like molten stars, scanning the streets below with cold intelligence. Some had long, whip-like appendages, others bore weapons integrated into their bodies, glowing with energy that seemed alive. Every step they took cracked the asphalt, sent cars skidding, and shattered streetlights. Tony's repulsors activated automatically, scanning for weak points. "Looks like we've got company, and not the friendly kind." He zipped across the skyline, weaving between glass towers and digital billboards. From below, screams rose as civilians scattered in panic. Chaos erupted as alien energy blasts tore through the streets. The first wave of aliens landed with thunderous impact. Their weapons discharged in synchronized bursts, leveling cars and uprooting lampposts. Tony dodged a plasma strike mid-flight, narrowly avoiding a wall of fire that consumed a food truck in a flash. The city was quickly becoming a battlefield, a mix of steel, glass, fire, and light. "All right, let's see what we're dealing with," Tony muttered, analyzing the alien formations. Unlike previous enemies, these weren't mindless attackers. They moved in unison, tactical, almost intelligent in their assault. He toggled through suit settings, deploying micromissiles and repulsor beams. Explosions lit the streets like fireworks, sending debris spiraling through the air. A massive four-armed war beast broke from the group, charging toward him. Each arm ended in a crystalline blade that glowed violet, cutting through the air with deadly precision. Tony zipped upward to avoid the first swing, firing a repulsor beam mid-dodge. The alien staggered but didn't stop, using its momentum to swing a second arm. Tony twisted, feeling the heat of energy discharges singe the edges of his armor. Below, civilians were trapped between the alien lines. A mother clutched her child as cars and debris scattered around them. "Hang tight," Tony muttered, firing targeted shots to create a safe corridor. He zipped past falling signage and twisted mid-air to avoid a debris strike, his movements precise, almost balletic despite the chaos. From his HUD, Tony identified a larger presence among the horde, a massive alien leader. Crystalline armor covered its body, each facet pulsing with energy, and its eyes burned brighter than the others. This was no random invader. This was a commander, orchestrating the chaos. Tony felt a pang of unease. Whoever this was, they were more than a physical threat, they were strategic, intelligent, and deadly. The first clashes shook the surrounding buildings. Explosions tore through glass facades, sending shards raining down onto streets below. Tony barely avoided a plasma beam that sliced a skyscraper wall in half. He pivoted mid-air, firing repulsor blasts that struck an alien in the chest. The creature faltered, staggering backward, but quickly recovered, launching a volley of energy spikes that forced Tony to take evasive action again. Tony's HUD beeped continuously, tracking alien movements. They're coordinated, almost like they've been trained for this. He activated a new experimental feature in his suit, a repulsor net designed to temporarily disable energy weapons. Firing it, he wrapped a group of alien attackers, seeing them freeze in mid-attack. But the relief was brief. From the portal, reinforcements continued to pour through, more aliens streaming into the city as if Manhattan were a magnet. "Okay, Tony, think. he muttered aloud. Civilians were still in danger. Buildings were at risk. And the portal, that thing couldn't stay open forever. Using the suit's advanced sensors, he located the portal's energy core. Its glow pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat, stabilizing the rip and keeping the alien force coming. Tony realized he needed a plan, not just brute force, to close it. Zipping over the rooftops, Tony focused on the civilians trapped in a partially collapsed building. Alien warriors approached, their glowing eyes scanning for targets. He fired a precision missile, detonating it just enough to create a path. The mother and child ran toward safety, eyes wide with terror, as Tony covered their retreat with rapid energy blasts. The weight of responsibility hit him hard. Protecting humanity meant more than defeating aliens, it meant saving lives in the chaos. Above the city, the alien leader moved closer to the portal, sending a pulse of gravitational energy that bent nearby skyscrapers slightly, cracking glass and buckling steel. Tony was forced to dodge rapidly, recalculating every movement. The aliens weren't just strong, they were reshaping the battlefield itself. Manhattan had become a war zone, and the rules of physics themselves seemed to bend under the aliens' presence. Tony took a deep breath. If he could survive the first wave, he could study their behavior, find weaknesses, and hit back smarter. He zipped toward the largest group of aliens, launching a combination of missiles, repulsor beams, and experimental gadgets. Explosions lit the sky as aliens fell back, but for every one he defeated, 2 more took their place. The city groaned under the weight of battle. And then the leader spoke, though not in words, but a vibration that resonated through Tony's armor and the very ground beneath him. The alien had awareness, intelligence, and intent. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a test. Humanity was being measured, challenged, and the outcome was uncertain. Hovering above the battlefield, Iron Man clenched his fists inside his gauntlets. Manhattan was alive with fire, chaos, and determination. Tony Stark, genius, billionaire, and armored hero, looked at the alien leader and the horde surrounding it. "All right," he said through gritted teeth, "let's see what Earth's really made of." The sky above remained a swirl of violet energy, the portal pulsing with an ominous rhythm. Below, Manhattan's streets were a chaotic labyrinth of destruction and hope. The arrival of the alien force had begun, and humanity's mightiest defender had only just begun to fight. The first chapter of the battle was over, but the war was only beginning. The clash. The streets of Manhattan were a war zone. Smoke twisted upward from shattered cars, flaming debris lit the skyline in intermittent bursts, and the air itself vibrated with the energy of alien weapons. Tony Stark hovered above the chaos, scanning for patterns. The first wave of aliens had been relentless, but nothing compared to what he was seeing now. The alien leader, Xelthar, towered above the others, crystalline armor refracting the violet light of the portal behind him. Every step he took seemed to warp gravity around him, lifting cars and street debris like toys and sending them hurtling through the streets. Tony dodged a massive chunk of concrete, firing his repulsors mid-twist. Sparks and fragments showered the streets below, narrowly missing terrified civilians who scrambled for cover. "They learn fast," Tony muttered, analyzing his HUD. The alien swarm wasn't just brute force, they were tactical, coordinated. When he hit one group, another flanked him, moving through the streets and alleys with terrifying efficiency. His repulsor beams tore through some, but the armored creatures absorbed a surprising amount of damage before faltering. The battle moved into Times Square. Neon billboards flickered and shattered as Xelthar's gravitational pulses distorted the buildings. One blast sent Tony slamming against a billboard, almost losing his balance mid-air. "Okay, new plan," he muttered. He activated the suit's repulsor micronet launcher, designed to temporarily disable the aliens' energy cores. The net shot out, wrapping around 3 of the smaller warriors. They froze, convulsing as the net short-circuited their energy flows. But Xelthar was not deterred. He extended one massive arm, sending a shockwave through the ground that flung Tony backward. The streets buckled under the force, cars flipping end over end. Tony twisted mid-air, firing a concentrated blast at the alien's chest, but the crystal armor barely flinched. The alien roared, sending another pulse that warped gravity, forcing Tony to fight not just the enemy but the environment itself. He quickly realized the aliens had distinct abilities. Some could phase partially through solid matter, dodging attacks. Others emitted bursts of energy that destabilized his suit systems temporarily. The largest, Xelthar, controlled gravity and energy with terrifying precision. Tony's HUD flagged their weaknesses, the glowing nodes along their backs and limbs, but hitting them would require timing and precision he couldn't afford under constant assault. "Time to improvise," Tony muttered. He zoomed through the streets, using the city as a makeshift obstacle course. Dodging debris and plasma blasts, he led smaller groups of aliens into tight spaces between buildings, forcing them to collide with walls and each other. It was risky. Any miscalculation could crush civilians, but it worked. The smaller aliens faltered, giving him brief windows to strike. Xelthar's gravity manipulation intensified. Manhattan streets twisted and warped, debris floating mid-air, cars spinning like toys. Tony activated the suit's anti-gravity stabilizers, recalibrating in real time to counter the alien's pull. He darted around the battlefield, weaving between floating shards of glass and steel, every movement precise. Energy beams streaked past, colliding with the alien warriors, and sparks rained down in cinematic showers of light. A new tactic emerged. Tony began using the environment itself as a weapon. He fired repulsors at water mains, causing jets of scalding steam to burst into the air, momentarily blinding the aliens. He shattered streetlights and sent them hurtling at armored warriors, buying crucial seconds. Every blast and maneuver was calculated to create a domino effect, turning the alien force's coordination against itself. From above, Tony's HUD tracked Xelthar. The leader moved with intelligence, predicting Tony's attacks, adapting quickly. Tony needed a decisive strategy. He analyzed the portal's energy signature, realizing the aliens were connected to it. If he could destabilize the portal, he could cut off reinforcements. But doing so meant getting dangerously close to Xelthar. "Let's see if I can lure you," Tony muttered. Using a combination of repulsor flares and explosive decoys, he drew the alien leader into a narrow street flanked by half-collapsed skyscrapers. The gravity pulses became less effective in the confined space. Tony fired his concussive micromissiles, hitting Xelthar's nodes along the back. The alien staggered, shards of energy cracking along his crystalline armor. But the victory was temporary. From the portal, more aliens poured through, forming a new wave. Tony's HUD pinged. He needed to neutralize the portal quickly, or Manhattan would be overrun. He dove toward the glowing vortex, weaving past floating debris and hostile fire. Every second was a battle. Every movement required split-second calculations. Mid-flight, Xelthar extended a limb, generating a massive gravitational vortex that tried to pull Tony directly into a collapsing street. Using the suit's anti-gravity thrusters, Tony twisted out, firing a focused repulsor beam at the alien's chest node. The beam shattered part of the crystalline armor, forcing Xelthar back momentarily. Sparks flew, energy surged, and Manhattan streets buckled under the strain. With civilians still trapped nearby, Tony realized he couldn't fight Xelthar head-on for long. Instead, he devised a counter-strategy, hit the nodes while destabilizing the portal. He zipped through the city, using vertical and horizontal movement to avoid the aliens' attacks. Micromissiles hit nodes, repulsor beams shattered alien defenses, and debris became both shield and weapon. By the end of the battle, Tony had carved a path to the portal, weakening Xelthar's forces, though the leader remained formidable. The city was scarred, Manhattan groaned under the alien assault, but Iron Man's ingenuity, strategy, and sheer resilience had turned the tide. Hovering above the streets, Tony activated the HUD and scanned Xelthar's energy signature. "All right, buddy," he muttered. "This ends soon. Time to shut that portal down." The leader's eyes glowed with fury, sending a pulse through the city that warped buildings and hurled debris. Tony gritted his teeth. He wasn't done yet, and neither was the fight. The first tactical victory was his, but the war was far from over. Manhattan had survived, barely, and the humans inside it had something to believe in. Against overwhelming alien might, one man in red and gold had begun to turn the tide. Turning the tide. Manhattan was a city on the brink. Smoke and debris twisted into the violet haze overhead, remnants of Xelthar's gravity pulses scattered across the streets like shards of a broken mirror. Iron Man hovered above the chaos, scanning, analyzing, and calculating every possible outcome. The first wave of aliens had been brutal, but now Tony had a plan, a way to finally turn the tide. Xelthar stood at the center of Times Square, radiating raw energy, his crystalline armor glinting with every pulse from the portal. His control over gravity distorted the city itself, bending steel, twisting streets, and levitating debris that rained down on fleeing civilians. Tony knew he couldn't defeat the alien leader through sheer force alone. Xelthar's adaptability and intelligence meant direct assaults would only delay the inevitable. "Time to get creative," Tony muttered, activating the suit's experimental modules. Micromissiles lined with electromagnetic pulses, repulsor nets, and anti-gravity thrusters engaged in synchronization. Every weapon was programmed for precision strikes, targeting the glowing nodes along Xelthar's crystalline armor, the only visible weak points. Tony zipped between partially collapsed skyscrapers, using the environment to his advantage. Cars and street signs became improvised projectiles. Bursts of energy and debris disoriented the smaller aliens, forcing them into defensive positions. Using the suit's HUD, he calculated optimal trajectories, launching missiles that ricocheted off surfaces to hit targets previously unreachable. Xelthar roared, sending a pulse of gravity that twisted the streets and hurled massive chunks of concrete toward Iron Man. Tony flipped mid-air, narrowly avoiding a collapsing lamppost, and retaliated with a micromissile volley, striking the alien's shoulder nodes. Sparks and shards of crystal flew, and Xelthar staggered, a flicker of vulnerability momentarily visible. But the alien was relentless. He extended an appendage, generating a massive gravitational field that lifted an entire bus and hurled it toward the streets below. Tony had anticipated such moves. Using his thrusters in combination with magnetic pulse boosters, he slingshot past the attack, striking Xelthar's other nodes with pinpoint precision. Each hit weakened the alien's control over his gravity manipulation, creating small but crucial openings. The battle wasn't just about brute force. Tony began to notice patterns in the alien's attacks, brief pauses after each energy pulse. Timing became everything. Each repulsor blast and missile launch was calculated to exploit those fractions of a second. The alien leader's coordination faltered, smaller warriors hesitating, unsure of their next moves. Tony's counter-strategy extended beyond offense. He drew smaller alien squads into tight alleys and narrow streets, forcing collisions and chaos among their ranks. Explosions of plasma and sparks illuminated the battlefield, creating a spectacle of destruction and precision. Manhattan's streets were a maze, and Iron Man used every inch to his advantage. Meanwhile, the portal loomed ominously in the sky. More reinforcements were still emerging, and Tony knew time was critical. He activated the suit's long-range targeting system, aiming a concentrated energy pulse at the portal's core while dodging Xelthar's attacks. The pulse disrupted the alien technology sustaining the rip, causing visible instability. The portal shuddered, sending a shockwave that unbalanced Xelthar, throwing him off rhythm for a precious few seconds. Seizing the moment, Tony dove directly toward the alien leader, weaving through floating debris and collapsing structures. Repulsors flared, missiles detonated, and sparks flew in a blinding display of energy. Xelthar's crystalline armor cracked under the focused assault, shards scattering into the streets. Smaller aliens faltered, confusion spreading like wildfire through their ranks. Even as he struck, Tony didn't lose sight of civilians. Groups trapped in damaged buildings were guided to safety by calculated blasts that cleared paths and neutralized nearby alien threats. Manhattan was a battlefield, but Iron Man's ingenuity allowed him to create pockets of protection amidst the chaos. Xelthar roared in frustration, attempting a massive gravity surge to crush Iron Man against a skyscraper. Tony twisted mid-air, activating the anti-gravity thrusters and launching a repulsor-charged micromissile directly at the alien's central node. The impact caused a massive crack across Xelthar's armor, energy spilling uncontrollably. The alien staggered backward, losing coordination, his minions faltering in response. With the smaller aliens disoriented and the leader weakened, Tony focused on the portal. Using a combination of repulsor energy and magnetic pulses, he created a destabilization field that caused the portal to flicker and tremble. The alien leader roared, attempting to stabilize the rip, but the timing was perfect. Tony's micromissiles struck the portal's core with precise synchronization. A brilliant explosion of violet and golden energy erupted, scattering the remaining alien forces. For the first time, the tide of battle turned in Iron Man's favor. Xelthar, battered and disoriented, was forced back toward the portal, unable to control the battlefield. Smaller aliens either fled or fell, and Manhattan's streets began to stabilize. Tony hovered above the city, taking stock of the chaos he had wrought, buildings damaged, streets cracked, fires burning, but most importantly, the civilians were safe. Iron Man landed briefly atop a damaged skyscraper, scanning for remaining threats. The portal shimmered and collapsed, leaving only fragments of energy floating in the sky. Xelthar, though wounded, was still alive, his glowing eyes fixed on Tony with fury and calculation. Tony activated a final module in the suit, ready for the next move. "You're going to have to do better than that," he said through gritted teeth. Earth fights back. The battle was far from over. The alien leader remained a threat, the city still in ruins, but Tony Stark had proven that intellect, strategy, and human ingenuity could overcome even the most formidable alien power. Manhattan had survived the worst of the onslaught, and for the first time, Iron Man knew that the aliens were not invincible. As he hovered above the skyline, watching the sun break through the violet storm, Tony made a silent promise. No matter how powerful the enemies from beyond the stars might be, humanity would fight, and its heroes would rise. The tide had turned, but the war was only beginning. Victory and reflection. The air over Manhattan was heavy with the aftermath of battle. Smoke spiraled from fractured skyscrapers, fires smoldered in streets, and shards of glass shimmered like dangerous crystals under the afternoon sun. Iron Man hovered above the city, his armor scorched and scratched from the relentless fight, but his eyes, glowing behind the helmet, were steady, scanning for any remaining threats. The portal that had unleashed Xelthar and his alien force had collapsed into a flickering haze, leaving fragments of violet energy drifting like ghostly sparks. Below, Manhattan was battered, but humanity had endured. Civilians, guided by emergency responders, cautiously emerged from shelters and debris, staring up at the armored figure who had saved them. Tony Stark took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. This was the calm after the storm, the fragile silence that followed chaos. Xelthar had fallen, weakened and disoriented, retreating to the remnants of the portal. The alien leader's crystalline body flickered, fractured shards of violet energy crackling across his armor. He had been a force of raw power, capable of bending gravity and tearing through steel with impunity, yet Tony's ingenuity, strategy, and precise attacks had turned the tide. Humanity had survived because one man refused to yield. Hovering near the top of a damaged skyscraper, Tony surveyed the streets below. The wreckage was immense. Cars flipped, buildings cracked, and debris littered every block, but the people were alive. The screams of panic had faded, replaced by cautious cheers. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was more than a battle. It was a reminder of what it meant to protect life. "Earth fights back," Tony muttered under his breath, almost as if reassuring himself. He knew the aliens were not finished. Xelthar's retreat signaled only a temporary reprieve. Somewhere beyond the stars, more forces might be preparing, waiting for an opportunity. But today, humanity had won, and that counted for everything. The city below was slowly recovering. First responders moved among the chaos, guiding civilians to safety. Tony watched as a mother reunited with her child, as strangers helped each other through the rubble. Despite the destruction, the resilience of people was evident. He had fought to protect them, but their courage, too, was part of the victory. As he hovered, Tony reflected on the battle. Xelthar had been an intelligent and adaptable opponent, unlike anything the world had faced before. Fighting him had required more than strength. It had required strategy, improvisation, and rapid decision-making under extreme pressure. Every maneuver, every micromissile, every repulsor blast had been carefully calculated, exploiting the alien's weaknesses while protecting the civilians around him. Even in victory, Tony could not ignore the consequences. Manhattan's skyline bore the scars of the battle: fractured buildings, shattered windows, scorched streets. The economic and structural damage was immense. But he knew humanity could rebuild. Humans were survivors, capable of turning disaster into opportunity. That resilience, that ingenuity, was something even Xelthar could not comprehend. The portal's remnants flickered one last time before disappearing entirely. A faint hum of alien energy lingered in the air, a reminder of the threat that had come from beyond the stars. Tony knew that this victory was temporary. The universe held countless forces far stronger than any human, yet today had proven something essential: humans could endure. Hovering above the wreckage, Tony allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had saved countless lives, protected his city, and pushed back an alien force that had threatened Earth. Yet, as always, his mind raced forward, anticipating the next challenge. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and dangerous, and humanity's survival depended on vigilance, courage, and heroes willing to act. He descended slowly to street level, landing with a controlled flare of his thrusters. Dust and debris swirled around him as civilians stared in awe. Some cheered, others remained silent, their eyes reflecting relief and gratitude. Tony lifted his helmet, revealing a smile beneath the soot and scratches. "Earth's still standing," he said quietly, "and I'm still flying." As emergency teams moved in to clear debris and help the injured, Tony looked up at the sky. The violet storm had cleared, leaving sunlight glinting off the broken skyscrapers. Manhattan, though scarred, was alive, a testament to human resilience and determination. The battle against Xelthar and his alien force was over, but the city, the people, and their spirit had endured. Iron Man took to the sky once more, flying over the city he had protected. From above, he could see the human capacity for hope, courage, and survival, qualities that no alien invader, no matter how powerful, could ever destroy. He knew that threats from beyond the stars would come again, but humanity would always fight, and heroes would always rise. As the sun broke fully through the clouds, casting warm light across Manhattan's battered streets, Tony allowed himself one final reflection. Today, the city had survived because of courage, intelligence, and the unyielding will to protect what mattered most. And as long as heroes like him took to the sky, Earth would never face the stars alone. The battle was won. The city had endured. And in the quiet moments after chaos, Iron Man knew this simple truth: humans were remarkable, resilient, and unstoppable. Against overwhelming odds, against alien might and cosmic power, humanity had prevailed. And somewhere in the sky, hidden in the cosmos beyond the portal's reach, Xelthar's fury still burned, but so did the indomitable spirit of the people of Earth.